Mr. Bob's Railroad Workbench, where we talk about math, science, history, and trains, and do it all with some very fun activities. Hello, I'm Bob Lettenberger, Mr. Bob, Education Director for the National Railroad Museum. If you're watching us today on Facebook Live and want to type in a question, well, feel free to do so. We're going to answer those right after the segment today. Also, if you're watching and just want to let us know who you are and where you're watching from, feel free to type in. We'd love to hear from you. Also, make sure that you like the National Railroad Museum's Facebook page. Well, today we are here at the National Railroad Museum and we are in the Bauer Drumhead Gallery, which brings up the question, well, what is a drumhead? Well, you may have noticed in our opening shot that the drumheads are illuminated signs, generally round, and in pre-Amtrak times, before 1971, they hung on the back end of passenger trains, the named passenger trains here in the U.S., in order to help promote and identify them. Let me give you an example. Imagine that this is actually the back end of an old passenger train, one of the open air observation cars. And that drumhead would hang right here on the back gate on the back platform. And as that train went by, you might look as it passes and see that drumhead and go, wow, that's a pretty neat train. The next trip I take, I want to ride on whatever that drumhead was. Now, the drumheads also tell a very interesting story about passenger trains here in our country, and the drumheads themselves tell a very interesting story. If we look at some examples here, you see the Empire Builder, which was the #1 train for the Great Northern Railway. Well, it's not a round drumhead. This one happens to be in the shape of a rectangle. But the other thing that we can see from this drumhead is that it's an earlier one because the lens is actually hand painted. You can see the brush strokes of where the artist painted that drumhead. If we look right next door, the Olympian from the Milwaukee Road, the Olympian being a train that traveled to the West Coast on the Milwaukee Road's Pacific extension. This one is that traditional round shape, and you notice the graphics are nice and neat and clean. Later on, as printing technology advanced, the lenses for the drumheads were actually printed, and that's how you got those nice clean lines as opposed to some of the hand-painted earlier ones. Also from the Olympian, we can see the idea of where the name drumhead came from. You will notice that, well, it kind of looks like a drum. Now, don't beat on these. They're actually pretty valuable. But the idea for the name didn't come so much from the musical instrument, but from the round oil barrels that you might find around the train yards. Now, drumheads also can tell interesting stories about the history of trains here in our country. If we look toward the bottom row here, we see a drumhead for the Santa Fe's El Capitan. This was a train that traveled from Chicago to Los Angeles. It traveled on the same route as the Santa Fe's #1 train, the Super Chief, but this was the economy coach train, if you will. Now, if we look right next door to that, we see another drumhead for the Santa Fe that says Super Chief El Capitan. As passenger train traffic dwindled, especially toward the 1960s, many railroads made moves to economize. The Santa Fe, one of their moves was to combine the Super Chief and the El Capitan into one train traveling the same route, first class and coach services all in one passenger train, and the drumhead, the new drumhead, was designed to reflect that. So the drumheads also tell some interesting stories about passenger trains here in our country. So the next time you visit the National Railroad Museum, make sure you stop into the Bauer Drumhead Gallery and explore the drumhead collection, one of the largest collections of drumheads that is known to exist, and also learn the stories behind some of the great passenger trains here in the United States. Hey, I'm Mr. Bob. Thank you for visiting Mr. Bob's Railroad Workbench today. We do hope to see you again very soon. Also want to mention that the National Railroad Museum inspires lifelong learning by providing dynamic educational opportunities through the preservation of railroad objects, engaging exhibits, and innovative programs. As a nonprofit educational institution, we are supported by both public and private donations and our museum members. For more information on how you can help support the National Railroad Museum, visit our website, nationalrrmuseum.org. And of course, thank you for all of your continued support. Hey, thanks for stopping by Mr. Bob's Railroad Workbench, and we hope to see you again real soon.